Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. This show is brought to you by Simplifying, which has been helping build trust in travel for over a decade. Through in-depth conversation with aviation leaders, sustainability in the air breaks through the current clutter and provides a clear roadmap for the future. It's about time we embarked on creating a net zero future for the industry, together. This season of the podcast is brought to you by Carbon Click, leaders in managing carbon offsetting programs for top global airlines. Without further ado, here is your host, Shashank Nigam, CEO of Simplifying.
Welcome to another episode of Sustainability in the Air podcast, and my guest today is Dr. Patrick Gruber, who is the CEO of Gevo. You may have heard of them of late because they've been signing deals left, right, and center with airlines and the larger aviation ecosystem around sustainable aviation fuels. Patrick, welcome to the show. I'm very curious, what's your journey been at Gevo? You've now been the CEO for the last couple of years, isn't it?
Well, quite a while now, yeah. So, what's weird is I'm one of the old timers in this industry of renewable resource-based chemicals, plastics, and fuels. I actually started working on this in 1989. And I worked at Cargill for many years. And if some of you might be familiar with that plastic that's biodegradable, compostable, that clear cup with a green band on it, I invented that plastic and commercialized it. So I'm an old hand, and my actual team here at Gevo is an old hand at how do you make chemicals that can drop in and displace petrochemical-based products. And so I got to Gevo because I got bored at that job, and I want to do something bigger, and the bigger thing was hydrocarbons because, we got to have drop-in hydrocarbons if we're going to solve greenhouse gas problems. And so it worked out that Vinod Khosla had already been working at a company called Gevo. They were doing something else, and they wanted to reboot it. And they, along with the Virgin Green Fund, recruited me and gave me the start money to go do hydrocarbons. And that was actually in 2007. So I've been plugging away here on how to make the jet fuels, how to do this carbon accounting, how to reduce the energy since back then. And we're finally at a place where we can get something done. Finally.
Wow, indeed. And finally is indeed the thing. You've recently inked deals with top airlines around the world, from Delta to SAS Scandinavian, and even One World Alliance. Is SAF becoming the new liquid gold?
Well, it's a strange thing because people talk about it with so much hype because everyone goes, oh, airplanes, bad, no answer, must solve. Okay, cool. That works for me. And it gives us a market focus and stuff. But what's really changed is a couple things. One of them is that carbon can now be valued in the marketplace. So it didn't used to be that way. 5 years ago, it was not that way. It was a general kind of maybe it can be valued. Now people believe it can be valued. And this is partially because CARB in California and LCFS has done a good job. The new policy you have in Canada has done well, and that'll help. And there are various states, along with the U.S. has done a good job. EU red policy has done pretty well. So it's starting to be that people believe it. It's here to stay. And then the second thing that's occurred is, call it consumers have woke up, shareholders have woke up, and now they're going, hey, you emit greenhouse, you should do something about it. You're creating a problem and you got to be accountable for it. So the airlines have changed how they think about things. And the world at large is changing how they think about things. It's that combination of two things that creates the opportunity. And yeah, we've had the technology here in the background.
Wow. And this is quite the resurrection, right? And especially in the last few years or months when it comes to SAF. Delta and Scandinavian Airlines versus One World Alliance. What's the difference here?
They're kind of the same. They want to buy the jet fuel. They know they have to do something. They want to see companies like us be successful. They sponsor us. We use take-or-pay contracts. What take-or-pay contract means is that they're promising to buy it if I build it. Now, that's good because that helps me get financing on debt to go build stuff. So it's sponsoring the project is a way to think of it. And as compared to so often in my life of doing renewable products, a customer says, oh yeah, you make it, I'll buy it. You make it, I'll buy it. I promise. Hey, okay, I have the product. Oh, you actually made it. Oh, that's different. I'm not ready. And so here it's about keeping everybody aligned so that we can actually get it commercialized. And I got to applaud all these companies who are working with us because they're very thorough. Delta is done, they're giving it a lot of thought about how to play this game. And they have good insight because they have a refinery and they think differently about this. And the One World group is coming along, and SAS gets it because it's getting to be a pretty big deal, right? And you got some energy transition people involved too at Trafigura, same thing. And they all know they have to do something, and there aren't that many answers. There are just not that many ways to do it. As much as people would like there to be, there just aren't. So think about this for a second. Think about the problem with jets. The reason that people like jet fuel is it's energy dense liquid, right? It's very, very much energy packed into a small amount of space, right? So you can talk about the hydrogen, you can talk about the electric. Sure, there might be a place for those in certain applications. Long haul jets, not so much. It's a mathematical problem. So what do? Well, if we need jet fuel, then it's got to be a drop in because no one's going to retool and re-engineer everything. And number two is it's got to do the carbon reduction. So think about that. We got to take CO2 from the atmosphere, right? Think of it as fully burned carbon. It's got a carbon and two oxygens. We got to connect those dang carbons together with renewable electrons, pack them all together and make it exactly the same as what it was before, put it in a tank. And so you got to pack all that energy. You got to unburn it, so to speak, right? You got to unburn it and pack it all together. Well, okay, that's part of it. And then the second part is, well, how did you do it, right? You need renewable energy to do it if you want to drive the CI score. And that's what we do, is we take the approach that we have a business system where we're paying attention to not just how you connect carbons together and pack the molecules back together. It's also then we're putting up a wind farm. Kauai, guess what creates the biggest footprint for us as I manufacture something? Well, grid electricity in the United States isn't so clean. That's a freaking problem. So what do? Well, we don't want that. We put up our own wind farm. Or we got to heat the plant, heat the manufacturing plant to make the product, make steam. Well, I can use natural gas, but natural gas hurts my CI score. So we do biogas. So it's real practical stuff we're talking about, but it's a systems approach that we're doing here at Gevo. It's not just, miraculously, we have SAF. No. We're out to do net zero SAF and negative SAF. That's what we're out to do. And so it's a little bit different mentality, but we're managing the whole business system. And that's what attracts people to us.
Absolutely. That's quite commendable that you're taking a system approach, thinking about the entire system holistically. For the uninitiated, what is the CI score?
Carbon index score. So what this is an industry way of talking about how many carbon emissions something has. So think of it as jet fuel has 100. If it's fossil jet fuel, ballpark, it's a ballpark 100. And so we want to get down to as low as we possibly can, ideally to zero, or even it can be negative if there's opportunities to sequester carbon through the business system along the way. And so the idea of a CI score would be then from 0 to 100, right? It would be a CI score. So if I reduce it by 60 points, I'm down to a 40 CI score, down from the fossil base at 100.
Got it. And you need to get to 0 or minus.
I want to get to 0. We want to get our business system to be at zero to minus. Yeah, that's where we want to be. And think about that. We see potential to get to very negative if we're capturing the carbon, like we're burning biogas along the way in our business system. What if we captured the gas from that? What if we captured the gas from the CO2 from the fermentation? We do an ethanol fermentation. If we sequester that geologically, well, you know what? We're massively carbon negative then across the system. And so it's a different paradigm about what's possible. And the implication is the more negative we can get, the more you can blend in a fossil base and still be at net zero.
Right. Now, just looking at the system, right? Getting to net zero. One of the key things is about feedstocks. You can use feedstocks to get into SAF, but there are limited amount of feedstocks to go around in most of the world. And also, are all feedstocks equal? Do you use feedstock for SAF?
Yeah, so there's you need renewable carbon. So that's what you need that's really what you need is renewable carbon. And some people, are trying to justify the use of fossil-based carbon. It doesn't work if you're going to burn it and release it to the atmosphere. But okay, it's got renewable carbon. So where do you get renewable carbon? That means you can capture it directly. So there's some groups are talking about e-fuels. That could be done in some cases, but that takes an enormous amount of energy to do that, of renewable energy to do that. And the reason is to concentrate the CO2, do the chemistry to connect things together. That's like an enormous quantity of energy. Photosynthesis does that same thing for free. So that's the beauty of photosynthesis. What's photosynthesis do? Sunlight, water, carbon dioxide makes a carbohydrate. What do we use as a raw material? Carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are in all living plant matter that does photosynthesis. So we focus on using carbohydrates as a feedstock. There are some things that are readily available, like, we're using residual cornstarch, and I'll come back and talk about that in a minute, but but we could use molasses in other parts of the world, or we were the first to make jet fuel from wood sugars. We were the first to do that and prove it can be done. And we did that simply to make the point, it ain't that dang hard. We need somebody to go make the sugars, give them to me at economical price, and we'll go make jet fuel out of it. Ain't that big a deal. So those things are all possible. Now, the overlay is it's got to be done sustainably sourced raw materials. This is the important part that people sometimes miss. So it's got to be how exactly, if you're using corn, where'd you get the corn? How is it grown? Exactly how is it done? Well, that's part of what we do and pay attention to. And not only that, we're like, well, wait a sec. If we're doing corn, we want it to serve the food market too. Well, yeah, absolutely. So you separate the protein and the oil, you send that to the food market. What about carbohydrates? Well, 1 in 3 people are obese here in the States anyway. I'm not sure that they need more carbohydrates, for God's sakes. So, this is part of the balancing act. But people want it to be simple. I got news. To solve these problems, you got to look at the data and sort it out and pay attention to it. We can make better feed products that make cows burp less. We can do better products, so it isn't all one thing. It's about paying attention to it and addressing it. And so likewise, if I was talking using forestry products as a raw material, which we can do, we have a project set up with a company called Sweetwater. They're going to make us some sugars. Cool. Well, I'm going to care a lot about where exactly did they get that wood? How is it done? How is it harvested? How is it collected? How is it processed? What energy went into it? The whole bit. And that's the name of the game if we're going to be talking about sustainable stuff. So we just fully embrace that. And that's the way it has to be. We got to go measure the hell out of everything. That's what we got to do.
Yeah, that's so important, right? Measuring every step of the way. One of the fears, I think I saw this in somewhere in Europe, one of the fears was, if feedstock is used for SAF, there isn't going to be enough food going around. Do you think that SAF production is going to lead to food security issues? Is that a real concern?
We use carbohydrates. Okay, so it's like this. Food. If you're worried about food, you're worried about nutrition, eh? Right? Nutrition. Nutrition is all about protein. Protein. That's what solves malnutrition is protein. It's not carbohydrates. We're using carbohydrates. We're not using the protein, but people just simply go, well, it's all the same. No, it's not. Pay attention to how the world actually works. And so I see these people talk like that, and I just shake my head, and it's like, you live in the Stone Age. Wake up. That's not how it works. Now, if we're talking about wheat, where you need the whole of it for baking a bread, that's one thing. But no, why would somebody who's paying me for sustainability say, yeah, Pat, go ahead and use wheat. That's a good thing. I think I'll market that. No, we would not do that. That's not how it's going to work. That's not even practical or logical. Instead, it's like, no, we're taking the residual carbohydrates, they're in oversupply, and we're going to take and isolate the protein and the oil and sell that to the food market. That's what we're doing, literally. So it's this very much people want to do these broad political sweeping statements is what they want to do. Instead, can we just sort out the facts, really? And not all things are equivalent, like I say, because in a case like wheat, really, there's people who want to make it into bread, and that's really a good use of it. Now, get this. There's some places where they have excess carbohydrates from wheat. In Europe, they do. And because they take and do gluten fortified. And when you do a gluten fortified product, you're separating the gluten from the carbohydrates. Well, that makes the carbohydrate. Guess what those carbohydrates came from? Wheat. But they get an exception because, those are residual because they isolated the gluten. Well, that's the same thing we're doing.
That's good to know.
It's this very weird paradigm about that. So when they don't understand it, here's one that's one of my favorites is the corn one. The corn we're talking about, it's not in a can. It's not in a cob. It's not in popcorn. It's none of that. It's not in it's none of that. It's none of that. It's not even the same kind of corn. And only 1% of the corn is actually used. Corn in the U.S., only 1% of the corn is actually used for food.
Wow.
Directly.
Okay.
The rest of it goes to the food. That goes to animal feed.
I love this because this is working out like a Mythbusters edition of the podcast. You're busting myth by myth about SAF. And I have to address the big elephant in the room, which is about supply. There have been rumors, there's not enough SAF to go around. An airline that locks in supply today is the winner. Otherwise, you're going to get left out. Is there enough SAF to go around? Can SAF scale up fast enough to meet the industry's net zero goals?
Well, it's a good question. So guess how much SAF is produced in the world today? Just guess. How much? Take a wild shot at it.
20 million gallons? Down 10 million gallons? A million gallons?
It's between what? Probably it's closer to 5. And we're like the third largest producer with our 100,000 gallons. So all this world is full of hype. This is the problem that we have, is that everyone sits there and talks about everything. Now, the reality, Neste's got some product. Cool. Good for them. And World Energy's got some product. They're good, And then let's see, we're third. We are third. Are you kidding me? So the hype is so much in front of what reality is. It's mind-boggling. And so what's happening then is people are talking about making, I've seen lots of announcements for SAF or doing renewable diesel from oil seeds and waste fats and oils. That has potential, absolutely. But not everyone's going to do it because renewable diesel makes a lot of money. So why would someone add cost to making a product and turn it into SAF? Why would you do that? You wouldn't. And it's got a limited feedstock supply. So carbohydrates offer great potential. There's all these other techniques that people are talking about. They've got to get proven out. So there's many opportunities here, but it's at an infancy stage. So people think about the SAF thing as if it's some giant developed market. No. This is an emerging market. It's a question of how fast can we deploy. For their industry goals by 2030 or in 2040, that should be no problem, actually, for what they need to do. It should be no problem. The infrastructure exists, the basic infrastructure for this stuff. But you got to think differently and out of the box about it, too. It isn't like, it's not like turning on a spigot somewhere. Someone's got to go build capacity. And so this is what we have to deal with our shareholders all the time, and they don't understand it. No, we don't have it. We don't have a plant fairy here. We don't have a plant fairy where they just poof it into existence. It takes, you got to go design and build it. And now in this world, you got to pay attention to, where did I get that chip and that chip that goes into that control system? So it's a little bit more complicated. And so we're still, doesn't hurt our timelines. We're planning for that. But it's got to go build out. And that's why it's so important to see when our contracts, One World and Delta and these folk are doing. That's why it's so darn important, is because we got to know they're there. And we also have Trafigura, who's interested in jet fuel, and others in the energy transition space who will show up too. And so it's all good. And we're going to see energy companies jump in here more as well, I think, in the future, because there aren't that many ways to do this.
Absolutely. Now, if capacity is not the big constraint, what is the biggest challenge to the scaling up of SAF?
Well, I think it's about deployment of assets and financings and who's going to do what business system. We've had a lot of work to do on, it's the same questions you and I were talking about, the education work about how things, what is sustainable really, what are carbon scores really, and, it's what are the facts. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of education. It's just different than what people think. And we're complete advocates about, cradle to cradle, transparent accountability, even to the point of we're putting together a program that uses blockchain technology to track stuff all the way from the field to the marketplace. And so there's no hiding. It's going to be transparent, immutable stuff, audited. And we actually think we can tokenize it too for those traits that aren't captured. Otherwise, we can take them and we'll probably be able to monetize those. That's what we hope to be able to do. We call that verity tracking. But this is about trying to change everything. Now, here's something for you that's a controversial thought. What if an oil company took a program and said, let's reduce their carbon score for their jet fuel? And they did it in a systematic way we could measure it. Should that count? And I'm in the camp of, heck yeah, we're trying to solve greenhouse gas problems for the world. We're not trying to promote just one thing or one solution. We need them all, for God's sakes. And so how do we do this in a practical way, systematic, without being absurd, right? How do you go build stuff? How do you deploy it? How do you drive the carbon score down? This greenhouse gas thing's a problem. And so how do you do it and change and use the influence across? So here's a way to think of it. I want to influence agriculture. I want them better. I know that if they use, for instance, no-till technology, I get to minus carbon scores on my jet fuel product. Well, guess what? If I can get paid for that, I can pay those guys in the farming to help get them the equipment they need. Or I can help them be rewarded for making a better product on their side. So it's not this adversarial approach that we're trying to create a cooperative approach throughout the business system. And that puts us apart from almost everybody.
Oh, that is indeed the thing that is differentiating, because you can work with the farmer to do no-till farming and give them an incentive to do that.
Right.
You mentioned something earlier around transparency, and I want to dive a little deeper into that. You mentioned the Verity tracking program. You're also doing the Farmer's Edge tracking program. What's the difference, and why are you doing these tracking programs?
Yeah, so what it is one of the things that is you're looking at the major impact to carbon index, the CI scores, or how to drive the footprint down. There's really three components, four components probably, but one of them is where'd you get your carbon? How was it grown? How was it obtained? That's the agricultural side of things. There is where'd you get your electricity? What kind was it? Where did it come from? Where'd you get your gas? Where'd it come from? Where'd you get your hydrogen? We need a little bit of hydrogen. So, well, these three we already talked about: wind, biogas, and then we have wind, make hydrogen, green, 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 all good. Okay, now over here. And what we find is that if we've greened those energy sources, then we do you look at agriculture, if we did just the average mix in South Dakota, we'd be at about a 0 CI score across the whole life cycle, including what's done at the farm. If we were to use all no-till, we'd be at minus 35. Just from the farming technique, all minus 35. So, what that says is maybe we should organize it so we get everybody doing no-till, because then we could be minus 35. But there's no way to monetize that currently. So, because California doesn't pay you for that. They only just say all corn's the same. They've said they would look at individual data. If you can put in your business system and prove it, they say that they will look at that. Cool, we're going to go check that out. But in the meantime, that's why we're doing the Verity thing, is there's all this carbon value that we want to use for incentives and make money. And we can see that it's there on the table. We should try to capture it. Okay, back to Farmer's Edge. Farmer's Edge would be part of that. They have 18 million acres under data collection already. And so that's 18% of the acres of corn.
Wow.
Right, about. And so we can get that data and use that to measure what's being done in fields and help turn it into sustainability data. So they're collaborating with us on how to do that. And that's part of the overall game. So the idea is to get something where we can, instead of these foofy, fake carbon credit crap that we see around that everyone goes, I don't believe that. No, we're trying to go, there's the data. It's audited by NGOs. There it is. Here it is. And now it's verified. And someone should, if you're serious, you want it, you can pay for it, or we'll monetize it in some way.
So is the Verity verification meant to work with a program like Farmer's Edge? Verity just sits on top.
Yeah, that would be a Verity. So that Farmer's Edge data would be an input to Verity.
Got it.
And there'll be other inputs as well, including our own energy. And we're going to make this Verity available to everybody is what we want to do. Because remember, I'm on a crusade to solve greenhouse gases, and I don't accept it's too complicated crap. And it's and I know it takes all solutions. And I know that the fundamental problem is still fossil energy. This is the fundamental problem of greenhouse gases. 73% of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide come from burning of fossil fuels one way or the other. It's only 16% if we due to transportation fuels, and 16% worldwide on agriculture, 4% is animals, So it's really, come on. This is about, let's move the needle. It's about electricity. It's about natural gas. It's about how do you substitute for those things, and how do you turn them into other sources of energy? Because that's really what we're doing, right? We're taking and bottling up energy. It's liquid form. This is why people like it as a jet fuel. But you know what? You can put in a generator and make net zero electricity from it. That's also possible to do. So it's just the possibilities here are just different. Now, scale. You asked this earlier. It's going to be systematic, but you know what? We can convert ethanol into jet fuel, right? And so that means now our problem is we got to decarbonize ethanol plants to drive their CI scores down. What's their problem then? Well, they need renewable electricity, renewable natural gas. Oh, there's a common theme here. Hey, what do those EV guys need? Those EV guys need renewable electricity, Oh, and if they're going to they need biogas or something to make renewable electricity. So there's this what about the hydrogen guys? Oh, what's their problem? They need renewable electricity to make the hydrogen, or they need it's the common theme. It's this very fundamental energy infrastructure issue that we got to get our heads wrapped around it and say, well, let's systematically change that and all the rest. And for making products like ours are true drop-ins. So we can make intermediates that go right to a refinery if they want, or a chemical plant. We can do that. Or we can make finished fuels. So we can do either one. We're okay. But the law currently doesn't provide for shipping some intermediate. So there's all kinds of possibilities of what can be done. And we look at all that and go, yeah, that's all future. Let's go get stuff done now. The way you go down now is go build Net Zero 1, sign up these contracts, build Net Zero 2, 3, 4, scale it up, adopt ethanol plants, decarbonize them, build it bigger, spread around the world, license technology, help people count stuff through Verity. That's how we think about it. Let's get on and solve problems and quit talking. Let's go do.
I love the radical transparency, and this is a recurring theme in terms of getting to net zero. You've talked about the end-to-end ecosystem, and one incident I recently learned of was an airline flew a flight on SAF, but to get the SAF to their aircraft, they had to get it shipped from Netherlands to the United States and then trucked over to their airport. And I was just wondering, wait a minute, so I wonder how many what were the carbon emissions of getting that SAF to the aircraft? How do we address that transportation problem for SAF?
Yeah, so when people are doing these small amounts of demo projects and stuff, you got to give them a pass because they're trying to prove a point to an audience or do something. Okay, so I'm pretty generous in giving people passes because the reality is when you're not at scale, it's like, okay, you're going to make exceptions. So cool. At scale, it's going into a train, to a pipeline or a barge, and it's going into the standard tanks, right to the energy infrastructure around airlines. That's why you see energy companies starting to get involved. So they know that they're gonna if they want a preference in selling their fuel, they're gonna probably should blend it up with some SAF because that'd be easier you'd have an advantage over the next guy who doesn't have SAF blended in. So it's gonna make sense, and I like what the stance that the airlines are taking with us. We've come up with a pricing formula that works for them and for us, and I like it. They're sharing in the carbon risk with us, the carbon value risk. So the way the pricing works is that we do a benchmark price against jet fuel, and so jet fuel goes up in price, then there's a base price that goes up, and then there's a fixed price component that goes on top of that, like a tolling fee kind of a thing that we charge. And then we add up all the carbon values. You get three sources. There's a blender's tax credit, there's a LCFS credit, and then there's the RFS credit in the States. And we share part of that back with the airlines. And so now they're invested in seeing that green value stays. And that works for them because they see the day where it is possible that these things are cheaper than petrol.
Right. So let's talk about pricing. See, you brought up the perfect next topic. After scale, I was going to talk about pricing. Currently, my understanding is that SAF can cost 5 to 6 times the current jet fuel price. Or maybe because jet fuel has gone up, maybe not as much. What can we do to bring the price of SAF down or at par to the same as jet fuel?
Well, I think when people say stuff like that, we sell pretty expensive SAF now because we have limited quantities and it's a hassle. And so this demo quantities, that's not the commercial price. The commercial price is near parity already. So you just got to go build it at scale. Economics work. Any of us could do it. We just got to go get our plants built.
Okay. Wow. I did not know that the commercial price is already at parity, and that's really heartening to know. Talking about commercial plants being built, I recently read that Neste has announced a big plant in Singapore, and they use that opportunity to announce a green corridor with New Zealand. So Air New Zealand and Singapore Airlines flights will be powered by SAF in the future between New Zealand and Singapore. Is that a model you see potentially scaling for Gevo as well?
Nah.
Why not?
Ours is more, that's like, they're doing that for whatever reasons, good for them, and I encourage them, great. If it helps get it done, awesome. But, we look at it as like, ours is pretty simple. We make drop-in jet fuel. The customer can get it near parity. We charge them a premium a little bit, net, they get a premium, and they got to share in the green value risk too. But that's okay. That keeps them aligned with us. all good. And we got to go get stuff built. And so we all win. We make money. They make money. They have optionality. We can expand the business system. We have huge amounts of carbohydrate resources available around the world. And it's about doing it systematically and paying attention to it and the cost-wise. We also enable all these other things like the wood sugars and all these other fancier things. We can do that too. But they now could have a value proposition that's definitive. So we see it as, all those things make sense, but we're thinking bigger than that. So we're out to change the game fundamentally. Neste has a particular business system that they're working. Cool. Ours is like, no, I want as much companies successful. I want us successful. This market is humongous. And not that, people like us, we can make plastics too. We can do that. Nobody pays us for that. No one cares. But it would be carbon negative, massively carbon negative plastics. Think about this. If I have a gallon of my jet fuel right here in my hands,
okay,
and made from my plant, it's minus 100 CI score sitting here. I burn it. It goes back up to 0 because it releases CO2 when it burns. So think about that. It's sequestered carbon in a tank. Holy cow. How did that happen? Who would have thought that's possible? So that's what's interesting about this. Same thing with plastics and all these other things. No, but there's no mechanism to monetize those plastics yet. Not in a real sense. And so jet fuel provides a convenient opportunity to scale things, but it's just the beginning. And these technologies exist, and they're known. They're known technologies. It isn't like they're new. We've been doing this for over a decade, and so it's that we can monetize things and make money at it finally.
Right. The interesting thing is that given that SAF is drop-in, so there is barely any technology modification needed, given that you're telling me corporate price is already almost at parity, this is definitely an immediate to midterm solution for airlines to get to net zero. Do you foresee SAF becoming a long-term solution as well while airlines wait for other technologies like electric and hydrogen to mature?
Yeah, so if you talk, this is one of these ones, you should get somebody on your show from CAFE or you get some of those guys to talk about, or get some airline people or the actual people who build planes, because there's a spot where what happens is everybody wants these universal solution, and it just isn't going to work that way. It's going to take all answers, and it's going to work out in different regions. There's no one size fits all. What I can say is that jet fuel itself in jets, long haul, is almost impossible to displace with any other technology. And that reason is it's so dang effective for what its job is. So that market is humongous. So great, bring on the EV planes and someday bring on which you still, by the way, got to get renewable electricity to them, otherwise it doesn't count. Or get the hydrogen planes. Cool, that might work. Hydrogen has liquid hydrogen is like 4 times less dense than jet fuel. So cool, make your bigger gas tanks for hydrogen and figure out what you're going to carry and how to do that balancing act. And there's a little more efficiency when you use hydrogen as a fuel. So that has possibilities in certain areas, and it makes certain sense to solve a problem in certain areas. I get that. Cool, bring it. In the meantime, it's the one that uses and leverages existing infrastructure, technologies, and all the rest is the one that's going to grow fastest. That's just a practical, simplistic, Midwestern point of view of, keep it simple. And let's see, if it exists and it drops in and people don't have to change anything and they can use the equipment they've already invested in, they don't have to buy anything new, that may have an advantage.
You do make it sound like Midwestern simple. Keep it very, very, very simple.
You got to remember what happens in the space is that what I find one of the biggest challenges that I've had over my career, and this is the truth, is that everybody, we've got this cool thing we can do, and we're going to solve this, and blah, blah, blah. And it's the magic bullet. I got news. We got no magic bullets. This is grunt work. We got to count stuff. Where did it come from? The carbon. How did you process it? What energy sources did you use? How did you process it? It better be drop-in. It better go and burn. And you better keep track of it. It's grunt work, man. And it's complicated. You got to pay attention to the whole business system. The techniques exist, but it's really, you got to want to be willing to do the work. Instead of doing, I think I'll just sell this cool idea and hope I get paid $1 billion for it. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to make things real and solve a problem in a real sense. And so we're a different beastie. we've been here and done it before, and we are believers that we know how to do it too. So we're kind of crusaders in that regard, in that we know it can be solved. We can solve greenhouse gases, but you can't do it by just saying, we're going to do all one answer, and that's the answer. And I go, BS. It kills me. So we are trying to bring people together and go, no, my problem is, hey, EV guys, I'll help you get electricity. Get this. We're talking about building a net zero plant in Lake Preston, South Dakota. Okay. Lake Preston, South Dakota will make 50 million gallons of SAF, about 11 million gallons of other transportation fuels. It's going to use the wind farm, 60 megawatts of wind. We only need 30, but you double. And then you're going to do hydrogen. You got biogas. Net zero footprint. Cool. The mayor says, hey, Pat, you got like excess electricity? Yeah, sure. We got excess electricity. Hey, you think you can build us some charging stations for EVs? Because then as we build hotels, people can drive from Sioux Falls. Because otherwise they can't get here. It's too far. Well, yeah, sure. Why not? We can do that. Yeah, of course. That's all fair game for us. And it's just we're trying to solve, it's a renewable energy problem is what we work on. That's actually what we do. SAF is the way that we can drive scale and cause infrastructure development. And so we think a little bit bigger than ourselves. And that's how you see us organizing around our partnerships, who we hang out with, who wants to deploy capital. It's this little bit bigger vision, is that it isn't, the wind blows in the Midwest. We should have more wind farms. It doesn't blow some of those other places where they need lots of electricity. How are we going to get it from here to there? You could put it in liquid form and ship it down a rail pipe, or put it in a pipeline, or there's all kinds of answers once the people stop thinking parochially. So that's what we work on and crusade about. So when I'm out talking, it's a lot of trying to get people to think differently about this, and let's just collectively solve the problem. It's about paying attention to the whole and quit trying to pick the winners and losers and all the rest. Let's let data speak.
No, absolutely. It's admirable to see the holistic approach, and I see where you're coming from, that SAF is not the only goal here. It's the entire ecosystem that benefits. What would your advice be to an airline CEO who's just starting out on this sustainability journey and is completely confused by what seems like Wild West out there, from electric to hydrogen to SAF to carbon offsets? How do you get started on a sustainability strategy?
Well, first they got to talk with people in the been there, done it category, and there really are only a couple ways of doing this. Think about it. We know we're starting with CO2 in the atmosphere. We know what it looks like. It's called SAF, right? Let's see. Then it's a question of what's the price to get it delivered and when. So it isn't even there's trade-offs along the way in the business system, but they're all the same, and they're going to have various flavors of where you spent the capital, the operating costs, what your sustainability footprint and your energy mix looks like. That's where the nuance is, right? So it's not that hard. And as far as the hydrogen goes, cool. We actually are working on some of those programs too. Why? Because I got a whole lot of hydrogen I'm making from my excess wind. So people say, well, would you work with us on developing, airline plane? Sure. Hell yeah. I got stuff to sell that'll help your plane work. I got green hydrogen. Everywhere I go, there's going to be green hydrogen around me. So heck yeah, we'll do that too. And so put it on a timeline and we'll be there as a supplier. Cool with us. We're all good. It's all about the same problem, same systems. So it's not for someone who's coming along. I think if you're a CEO or the financial officer is the one who's more important, probably. You're going, let's see, most of my cost of goods sold is jet fuel, and so I don't want to increase cost. Cool. Guess what? You don't have to. Okay, a little bit. We get a little premium, but that's not going to make or break the bank. What you do have to do is commit to buy the stuff. And so that is hard. Not all airlines can afford to even say that they can do that because they're not in the financial strength to do that. Think about that. They can't. You'd be shocked at how many we go, hey, yeah, take or pay contract. You got to put up your balance sheet, promise your balance sheet, or you got to put up a letter of credit. They can't do that. They're not financially strong enough to do that. So now you have other ones who go, wait a sec. You mean that if our cash cost to produce is similar to Petrojet. So in other words, if I didn't have to pay back the plant and I didn't have to do depreciation, the actual just incremental cost to manufacture is the same as Petrojet. Okay? The people I'm competing against in Petrojet world have fully paid off, fully depreciated plants. So the really smart CFOs, they go, hey, wait a second. Your cash cost is the same and we're really transparent, so we just show everybody the data. Your cash cost is the same as the Petrojet guys. Yep, that's right. Well, that means your plant is paid off. You don't need any carbon credit and support. Yep, that's right. That's what that means. We figured this out already. And so, whoa, that's different than what they thought. And so we're out here. That's why we're getting business, is that we're just transparent with stuff, man.
Yeah, no, transparency definitely fosters trust. And in this case, because there's so many new developments happening, trust is important. And I applaud you for being radically transparent and for giving us a very good overview of where SAF is today. It was an enlightening discussion for me, and I'm sure it will be enlightening for a lot of listeners as well. Thank you very much again, Patrick, for shedding such good light, for being frank and completely being in your element. I'm sure lots of listeners are going to enjoy this episode. Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Thank you very much. We're passionate about what we do because we can see success and we know we can change the world.
Fantastic. I'm excited about your mission.
But it sounds good. You know what I mean?
But you are changing the world, so.
We're working at it, yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. We hope you liked it and will share it with your network. Please also leave us a review. Awareness is the key to a green future. Your support will help our insights on sustainable aviation reach a wider audience. In addition, for every single listen of this podcast, we will plant a tree, and for every single review, we will plant 50 trees. You can also write to us at podcast@simpliflying.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website, simpliflying.com, and join the movement.